What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Hear the Spear, presented to you by NoleGameday.com. We're here live on a wonderful, fantastic Monday afternoon, and we've got quite a bit to talk about on this Monday. Florida State originally was going to have their next cornerbacks coach, but he's actually headed to the Florida Gators. We've also got Tony Tokar's Florida State's quarterbacks coach finding a new gig, becoming Buffalo's new offensive coordinator. We'll have certainly a good deep
dive
into that. Yeah, not the Buffalo Bills. No, not the Bills and Josh Allen. I bet he wishes he had a quarterback like that, but the last few seasons, I don't think that's been the case with Tommy Castellanos and DJU. But we'll give our thoughts on that. Also, Derek Ray, it's been official there. He's headed to UCLA and to their front office also too. Nick Williams, Florida State's new edge coach and big-time recruiter. That became official for the Florida State Seminoles today. And then we're going to jump into the top 5 players Florida State must retain going into this 2026 season. And to finish us off, we'll have the latest on some FSU basketball and see what the issues are there with VZ. But with me is Austin VZ, our lead basketball writer in the middle, and all the way to the other side is Dustin D. Lou. Gentlemen, I just left 70 degrees to come up to 15 degrees for the Steelers Monday Night Football game. So I'm already ready for some football, but we've got a lot to talk about on the Florida State side as we head into a very busy offseason for the Noles.
Well, I'll be honest, it's not much better in Tallahassee, below 50 degrees. We had a freeze
says
warning.
below 50.
Hey, below 50. We had a freeze warning
That's cold
last
for the
night.
Floridians, man.
It's pretty cold, but a new week and interested to see what happens. I'm sure there'll be some more transfer portal departures, and now obviously Florida State back in the coaching market.
Yeah, it was about 19 degrees this morning when I woke up here in Charlotte. It's gotten up to about a toasty 31 degrees right now. But the transfers have at least slowed down for Florida State right now. I'm sure that'll pick up over the next week or two as we get a little bit closer to that, not necessarily deadline, but for that timeline for the transfer portal actually opening up. And there's probably some quarterbacks also that are hitting the market that Florida State should definitely be showing interest in.
Before we get into Brandon Harris going to the Gators, let's touch on the transfer portal. We don't have a list of it because we haven't had a lot in the last couple of days, but let's talk about Camden Fryer real quick, a legacy wide receiver deciding to enter the transfer portal in his first season as a freshman, dealt with an injury where he didn't get to see the field at all 2 years ago. And then this last year just was trying to fight and find some playing time as well with a wide receiver room that had a lot of young talent in there. There was, his class came in with a lot of talented guys, and it was going to be hard to go in there and get on the field early. But this is a legacy kid, and it's kind of been it's been a theme, a trend for this staff where, some of those legacy guys don't end up, I would say coming out too well of what you might have had some expectations. Not saying that Camden Fryer was going to be, a wide receiver one. That was never the expectation for him. But, Dustin, you and I had seen him in camps and that elite camp a couple of years ago. And him and Quindarius Jones, those two were, some of the stars in that camp. Luke Cromenhawk, Luke was dropping some absolute bombs, and Camden Fryer was just eating up the defensive backs and looked like the future was bright. Of course, you see Luke Cromenhawk, he's off to Mississippi State as now a backup quarterback, and now, Camden Fryer deciding to enter the transfer portal here. Just y'all's quick thoughts on that. I just wanted to bring it up for our transfer portal news.
Yeah, I mean, he just hasn't been able to break into the rotation over these past 2 years at Florida State, and obviously, like you kind of mentioned, Logan, that true freshman season was pretty much a wash. He suffered a lower body injury that kept him out for basically the entirety of the year, and tried to come back this season, fight into that wide receiver rotation, just wasn't able to ever make it into the 2 deep or anything. And, obviously a guy that brings a ton of speed to the table, and he's able to make contested catches as well, but not the biggest wide receiver either, coming over to the FBS level. And yeah, I mean, like you said, the legacies that Florida State have recruited, they've pretty much disappointed or not been able to produce here in Tallahassee for the most part. But hey, I mean, at least you had Deuce Robinson.
I was about to say, I think Deuce is the only one that has produced between Julian Armella and Boots and a whole bunch of other guys that have just not
MJJ.
developed. Yeah, just
Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones Jr.
Just a lot of guys that weren't able to produce, or in this case, just not get on the field at all. And it's one of those, if his dad was a Matt Fryer, I don't think anybody would care. So, didn't see the field in 2 years, so I don't think it's going to really impact anything.
No.
I will say his brother recently signed with Jacksonville State in this 2026 class, so be interested to see if maybe he makes his way over there in the portal.
Who's the head coach over there? Kelly?
It's Charles Kelly.
Yeah, Charles Kelly's over there. Yeah, I was just thinking about, for some reason earlier, I was on my flight, and for some reason that whole coaching job, because Clint Trickett now is the
quarterbacks coach at Auburn.
for Arkansas.
Sorry.
Yeah. So Clint Trickett's over there. So I was thinking, okay, but also too, Rick Trickett is on the staff at Jacksonville State. It's kind of crazy.
They got a lot of Florida State connections over there, and it's kind of weird.
Yeah. There's a lot there. So yeah, maybe he goes and joins his brother there. Best of luck to him. Great kid, great family too. We got to spend some time with him during his recruitment and such. So wish him the best of luck. Really speedy guy, strong too as well. So hopefully he finds a good landing spot for himself. All right, let's talk about Brandon Harris, man. This was crazy. This was wild. And the news broke earlier. What was it, late last week or over the weekend, right? Was this on Saturday?
Saturday night, I believe.
Yeah, it was like later, like 7, 8 o'clock, well after dinner time. But it was first reported from CBS Sports that Harris is going to the Florida Gators, originally expected to join Florida State football's staff, as we know, to his brother, Tim Harris Jr., also to coaching at Florida State as the wide receivers coach, which makes this even more interesting as well. This was crazy. This was interesting here. And, of course, John Summerall, they're trying to build a whole new staff, and, they're trying to put a lot of resources behind this new staff coming in and such. And it seems like the Gators might have had a better offer for him, but you would have thought the Seminoles had better leverage with his brother being on staff there. But nope, that didn't really help you as much.
Yeah, another stumble for Florida State and 2 years that have just been filled with various blunders on the field, off the field. And yeah, I mean, it's just not a good look for Florida State, optically and just for the program as a whole, because this was the guy that they had targeted to be Patrick Surtain Sr.'s replacement. I think he was the top option and the guy that Florida State really wanted. And from what I understand, I mean, he was even in Tallahassee at one point in the last couple of days. And instead, Florida swoops in there. I'm not exactly sure on the terms of the offers and comparing those or anything like that, but they swoop in there and they're able to land him. And, you got to remember Harris is a guy that had worked with Mike Norvell at Florida State previously. You mentioned his brother on the coaching staff now at Florida State. And still, I mean, they're left here at the altar. He goes over there to join John Summerall. And I would just imagine from his perspective, from his point of view, I mean, he's thinking there's going to be a longer leash with that coaching staff over there in Gainesville. And if things don't go well for Florida State pretty early on in the 2026 season, I mean, there could seriously be a head coaching change in Tallahassee, like we thought there might be this past season, but maybe it'll actually happen in 2026. So, I think there's probably just more job security going over to Gainesville at this point.
Yeah, it's actually broke late Friday night. I went back and double checked.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, this is what we were talking about, last week. We were saying this is one of the biggest lame duck situations in the country because there's just not a lot of security with this job. You have to go 8-4, 9-3 this year to feel comfortable about that, and nothing about this team or this roster makes you feel like they're going to get to that point of being an 8-4 or 9-3 team. There's just a lot of unrest, a lot of unhappiness around the entire program. So why would anyone want to join this coaching staff if they have other options? There's just going to be, better opportunity elsewhere for a lot of these situations. And especially for someone like Brandon Harris, who has been in and around the state of Florida, he gets to still stay in the state. And yes, it's for a rival. And he's probably going to make more money if I just had to guess, while still being able to recruit the state that he knows. And yeah, it's just a little bit better situation, but that's kind of just how this situation is going to go with Norvell still being retained as the head coach. You're going to have to settle for probably B-tier hires when that's not what this team needs.
Yeah, job security is a big thing, man, as it should be for any coaches and moving families, and you don't know how long that's going to be. And I'm sure that was a lot of thought going into for your two new coordinators with Tony White and Gus Malzahn as well. And, I continue to wonder, the admin's plan behind all of this, because it's starting to really feel like the administration for Florida State banked on another year, of course, with Mike Norvell. And I think they looked at the money issue and how much they still would have to pay on that buyout to Mike. And I think this was just set in place for a while. And we know that statement came out for Stanford and, of course, NC State, but, those were just putting out fires at the time, I do believe. And they really were banking on, having these two new coordinators come back. And I don't think they expected for Coach Surtain to no longer be on the staff moving forward. But I think certain things happened during the season between, Mike and Surtain, where things were just not headed in the right direction between those two. And I wonder as well, it starts to become an issue too when we were going to talk about some guys that Florida State needs to retain. One of those guys on my list is going to be Jabril Rawls. And, you want to keep that guy in Garnet and Gold going into 2026. He's a guy that plays really well, plays with a lot of effort, and was one of your top guys that you could look back on the 2025 season and say, yes, this is something I can build my secondary around. But Florida State's got to find someone. They've got to find an answer there to give some of these players and agents nowadays. It's crazy, gentlemen. Isn't it wild that, like, yesterday I was looking and you're seeing contract extensions?
Yeah.
But it's true. I mean, people can, say, well, why are you posting this? Why are you tweeting this? Why are you reporting this? These are contract extensions. If we're going to do it this way, this is how it's going to be worded in its verbiage. I mean, that's where we're at in college sports. It's crazy to think of, but Florida State has some guys that they do and need to retain and hopefully build some contract extensions with. And, there's some young guys in that secondary highlighted by Jabril Rawls that you want to have in 2026.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you have to leap into it and embrace the new age. And it feels like Florida State, they've been a little bit afraid to take that step. And I mean, they're going to need to in the near future when it comes to, roster retention and obviously building out that front office. So we'll see how it goes from that perspective. But I mean, this just feels like another TJ Rushing situation, except even worse because, the hire didn't even officially get announced. I mean, it was trending that way, obviously, and Florida State thought things were wrapped up. And then he's swept out at the last minute there by the Florida Gators. TJ Rushing at least was on the job for about 4 weeks or so before Texas A&M came into the picture and took him from Tallahassee ahead of Mike Norvell's first season at Florida State. But, TJ Rushing, that's a guy I wonder if Florida State potentially takes a look at. Not sure maybe how their relationship is between those two parties after his quick departure from Florida State previously. But, this is a guy obviously worked with Mike Norvell for a couple of years there at Arizona State and then at Memphis. And right now doesn't have a job, wasn't retained as Auburn safeties coach whenever Alex Golish came in. And, he's out there on the open market. I wonder if that's a name Florida State would at least show some interest in.
I also kind of wonder if just Cooper takes over the whole secondary. I know he's been a primarily safeties coach for pretty much his entire tenure as a position coach, but you do have to think about how many on-field coaches you could have. And when we were looking at the numbers with Harris there, you're looking at 11 coaches, even if we expect Papuchis to be shown the door eventually at some point in the next few months. I know it's taken a while, but it's at least another option that they could explore while they either get a different linebackers coach or we obviously know that they have to get a new quarterbacks coach, which we'll talk about here in a second, but just another option as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there could be some movement there on that side. I mean, we've always thought maybe Tony White takes over those linebackers, and if they move on from John Papuchis. I mean, we've talked about, Coach JP for a while. The linebackers is the linebackers, and it is what it is. You could point to three things: recruiting, development, the play, and then, of course, just how I would say if you're looking for a linebackers coach, which I do think Florida State does need to do, they got to find guys that are immediate impacts. And that's why when we talk about the transfer portal here in the next few episodes, that's going to be a main focus, is that linebacker room for that defensive side of the ball. And maybe Tony White takes over there at the second level. But it's interesting. I do think they are waiting a little bit, and it saves them a little bit of money. And there's no need to really rush Coach JP, but you just got to hope that Florida State does have a plan if they do decide to move on, either if it is Tony White taking over linebackers or they have another, player there ready to go. And that for a coach, I should say, the coach, the linebackers. Got to hope.
Gotta hope, but seems like they're just kind of nudging these guys along as far as the assistants whose contracts expire on February 28, 2026. Maybe Surtain Sr. was the one that expressed interest in returning to Florida State, and that's why they ultimately decided to fire him. But, the other guys we've seen, Yak obviously take the leap over there to Arkansas. Now Tony Tokar is going to the Buffalo Bulls. And, JP's contract is up as well. I wonder if maybe he's trying to find a position elsewhere, and that's Florida State moving on from these guys without officially firing them, but pretty much deciding to let them go.
Mm-hmm. And you would think too, we'd start getting some word if that is the case, because players are talking about, retention. There might be some in the linebacker room too as well. Transfers, the agents are going to hear things as well. So you would imagine it would start coming out, but we haven't heard much on, Coach JP's part. But not only linebacker play, but special teams has to be improved as well. That's got to be improved. And that's something that Mike Norvell pressed so heavily on in his introductory press conference when arriving at Florida State, that special teams is going to be a massive focus. And when we were there attending practices, there is a lot of special teams work. You start with special teams, you have it in the middle of practice, and you have it near the end of practice. Like, there is a lot of work that's done in special teams and practices. It just sucks that on the field and games on Saturdays, it doesn't do too well unless you have Ryan Fitzgerald kicking field goals for you and Alex Mastermont punting for you. Still got to take care of the business. And punt return, which I obviously just fell on its face at the end of the season this year. And then kick return has just been not a threat to anything. You would love for those two things to be improved as well.
Yeah, and special teams was supposed to be the lifeblood of this program under Mike Norvell, and he's talked about the importance of it. And these last 2 years, it's arguably parts of it, at least. You had your All-American punter and kicker unit in 2024, and you had a kickoff return from Samuel Singleton Jr., but the punt return wasn't good last season, and then basically this year, all facets of it were a failure for Florida State. And you did have some good moments in kickoff return. You just didn't return enough of them. That was the real issue there.
We talked about it. This team just didn't return kicks. I don't know the entire amount, but Jalen Lucas, I think, only had 11 returns this year total. I bet as a team, it was under 20.
It was like under 15.
Yeah.
Grant Wilkes here on YouTube. VZ, this one's for you. Papuchis is coaching the defense on the FSU basketball team. He might be.
That hurts.
He might be. That does hurt. It stings a little bit. We'll get into that a little bit more. We got to get the real reason what's going on with this FSU basketball team. But yeah, let's talk about Tony Tokars. So he is no longer on this staff. I know a lot of the fans and people on Twitter, expressing their feelings on their thoughts of the quarterback play the last few seasons outside of Jordan Travis, has seen him have that improvement until really his last season. Didn't see him. He kind of hit his ceiling there, I guess you can say, a little dinged up as well. But Tony Tokars, these last 2 seasons, just hasn't been able to click as well to be able to get these guys to play on Saturdays, it's felt like. At least when you point to Tommy Castellanos this last season, had a really strong start. You're like, okay, this is nice. But I think all of us on here and some fans are like, all right, let's see how long this can last. And also, too, you're playing against outside of the Alabama game, which was huge. You're playing 2 lesser opponents, and then things get really interesting, certain for Florida State on the road outside of that Virginia game where they were able to put up points. But we saw the regression of Tommy's play, and it just got worse and worse and worse as the season went on. Tony Tokars moving on after 6 years with Florida State, heading to Buffalo. Not the Buffalo Bills, but he's heading to Buffalo as to be their next offensive coordinator.
Just a rough couple of seasons in Tallahassee, and the last 2, but before that, I think there were some really good moments for Florida State. So a couple, yes. But like Yak going over to Arkansas, I just think, it was best for both parties just to kind of have a fresh start at this point with the way things have gone as of late. And, Tony Tokars, there was some real optimism there early on whenever he was promoted to quarterbacks coach. Kenny Dillingham going over there to take the OC job at Oregon before making his way to Arizona State as the head coach. And obviously Jordan Travis, goes on to have the 2 most productive seasons of his career in 2022 and 2023. You're able to sign some guys from the high school level. Brock Lynn was a 4-star at the time, and he had competed at the Elite 11. There was some excitement there. obviously Luke Kromenhoek and what Florida State's coaching staff and Tony Tokarz, I mean, was the one that ultimately identified him at a summer camp over a year before Luke Kromenhoek had started a game at quarterback at the high school level, able to get him on campus. Since then, things have been pretty rough. Brock obviously not taking those steps in his development, Luke transferring out after one season. I don't think it was Tony's idea to go out and grab DJU and Tommy Castellanos in the transfer portal, but you've got to work with what you've got. And I think you can say both of those guys, they didn't have their talents maximized in Tallahassee. And then Gus Malzahn, I mean, he's your offensive coordinator, but also a guy that has a strong background in quarterbacks. And, I think he's stepped into that room a little bit and taken some of those roles from Tony Tokarz throughout the 2025 season. So it just seemed like, it was best for both parties to part ways at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of like we've been talking about with a lot of these coaches. There's just no development. I mean, even if you go back to Jordan Travis's senior year, as a passer, he took a step back from 2022. He wasn't as strong as a passer as he was in his 5th season, I guess, technically, because he played 6 seasons. Just wasn't as good. Then DJ was a mess. Tommy was up and down. Brock Glenn has not developed at all. Luke Kromenhoek, you weren't able to retain, so it's hard to even count that as a recruiting win at this point. And you haven't been able to develop anybody in that room. And that's a problem at a school like Florida State, because you got to have a good quarterback to win in college football these days. You just have to have a good player back there, and we haven't had a good player back there. And a lot of that comes down to coaching and development. Yes, recruiting has played a part in that. There's a reason that Kevin Sperry was the best quarterback you're able to land in last year's class, and there's a lot to like there, but he still needs to be developed. And at this point, Tokarz hasn't shown that he can develop those guys.
Yeah, and Florida State's going to look for a transfer portal quarterback, and we've had a big discussion on that. They've got to find a guy that, and I'm personally saying they've got to find a guy that they'll spend a lot of money on. Will they, though? I don't know if they will. I'd lean on not likely that would happen for Florida State. But, you got to find somebody that can throw the ball. And that's been an issue for Florida State in these last 2 transfer quarterbacks. Maybe, you can find a guy that can run, be agile. And that's something Gus Malzahn is going to want to have in his offense. But got to get the ball on air. And, that's something that, developmental-wise, Florida State has had an issue with. And these players, and they feel strongly about Kevin Sperry, like you just said, BZ. There's some things to just have not seen enough to where you can name him as Florida State's starting quarterback in 2026. And it's going to be interesting now, Tokarz moving on, what they do to bring in as a quarterbacks coach to help out with that room, and Gus Malzahn. I think that's going to be extremely important too on the, Kevin Sperry. There's a lot of decisions that both Brock Glenn and Kevin Sperry will also have to make as well as this offseason process moves forward. And it's going to rely on who they bring in as a quarterbacks coach. And we're going to be keeping a very close eye on that.
I wonder if it's not going to be a very exciting move. Talked about in the last episode, but Florida State could potentially just give those titles to Gus Malzahn, who's got a long history in coaching quarterbacks, along with, being a head coach and an offensive coordinator. And then also ahead of this 2025 season, Florida State went out and hired Brendan Bogner as quarterbacks analyst, assistant quarterbacks coach. He worked under Gus Malzahn previously at UCF, was on the staff throughout the year. I wonder if maybe they just decided to go ahead and promote him due to the familiarity between both sides.
Y'all think they're getting the money realm of Arch Manning and Carson Beck? You think Florida State will ever do that?
Probably not. But
not this year.
If we want to have a fun discussion, Chris Hummer of CBS and 24/7 Sports just put out a report about the final days of DJ Lagway entering the transfer portal and what went down there, Florida's quarterback. And he has reported that Florida State is expected to show interest among a handful of other schools.
That doesn't shock me. That doesn't shock me. It really doesn't. Now, do you want to get involved there?
Nope.
With DJ Lagway? That's the next question. So it doesn't shock me that Florida State would be wanting to get involved, at least kick around, see what we're looking like. But do you really want them, though? I feel like you're heading back into I hate to say it, but you're heading back into a DJU experiment.
Well,
Someone that has played a good amount of ball. He's played the SEC level and such, but things just could not work well at UF. And I just don't know if a new stop somewhere else, just like DJU did going to Oregon State and then, of course, coming to Florida State, that didn't really matter a damn for DJU for his career. I don't know if Lagway is able to turn things around. What do you think, D-Lou?
It's tough to say. I mean, there's a ton of talent, a ton of potential there, but obviously just very inconsistent. And there have been stretches of very poor play from DJ Lagway over these past 2 seasons. So do you really want to bring in a reclamation project in a do or die season? It's almost the same to me as banking on a redshirt freshman and Kevin Sperry. Like, you don't want to go into the unknown. You want a guy that's done it, proved it, has shown consistency and the ability to go out there and win football games. You don't want to get yourself into a question mark going into this season.
I agree. Like, yes, Lagway has shown the ability to use his legs, which is something you need in this offense, but he has had some really rough games throwing the football. I forget what game it was that he threw 4 interceptions. Was it the Miami game that he threw 4 interceptions this year?
I think it was later in the season.
No, it was early. It was one of the first 3 games. Was it USF? It was one of those first few games.
He had 5. He had 5 against LSU.
5 against
Five
LSU.
against,
That's what
that
it
was the LSU game. Yeah.
You can't have that. You got to have someone that can produce. You got to have someone that can put up numbers and someone that's played winning football. He hasn't played winning football. His coach just got fired too because they couldn't win games. And as Grant said, he's hurt a lot. Like, he has all these minor injuries and that adds up. Like, you got to have a quarterback that can go out there and win games. And Lagway just hasn't shown that he can be that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're totally right there. I knew we were missing some, but yeah, he's a guy that's injury prone. He's one that's injury prone and also too likes to throw a lot of interceptions. And when I'm talking about passer, I like a guy that likes to throw, but you also got to take care of the ball as well. And this is where it gets very interesting. This is why this offseason is just trying to figure out things of connecting the dots of what the staff is going to be able to do through the transfer portal, but also to try to understand what the admin is trying to do at the very top of this. Like, what's their overall game plan? Because, they had to have set up. You got to hope. They've had a 3-year, 5-year kind of plan set in place for all of this. And right now it just feels like it's just a lot of scrambling, certainly too, after, that Stanford game. And, you thought you would have a plan for your front office, and that certainly isn't the case as we're in December 15th and we're getting closer and closer to where the transfer portal window is going to explode even more. We got championship or the college football playoff games coming up here soon, and then once those teams start losing, then those guys are going to be entering the transfer portal. Like, it is going to get very, very, very busy soon. And Florida State's got to find they're still looking for a new general manager and whatever other staff that they put around them as well, since they feel like that's going to be the biggest fix in order for Florida State to get wins on Saturdays.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have that general manager in place before the transfer portal window begins, because obviously you did not for the early signing period, so that GM wasn't able to have any influence there. I mean, what's the point of bringing in a new GM for this season if he's not there to help evaluate and, get guys in from the transfer portal? That would essentially mean you brought in a guy who didn't have any influence on the 2026 roster, which, again, what a plan for Florida State. But, hopefully they're able to get that guy in the building sooner rather than later, because like you kind of said, Logan, I mean, the days are ticking down. You've got things open up on January 2nd. So, I mean, you've got less than 3 weeks now to get this hire done.
Ideally, they have him in place by the end of this week. And there's been, as of now, there's been no smoke about
Give
what
me
direction
2 weeks
they're
ago.
going.
Give me 3 weeks, VZ. Give me right after the damn UF game when you knew that you wanted to win that game.
No, I agree. But I'm saying, like, if you're going to have a solid plan in place, it has to be by the end of this week, because he needs time to evaluate the guys that have already announced their intentions to enter the portal. He needs time to evaluate what's currently on the roster. It just doesn't magically come in one day. And the later and later you get, the more and more he's going to need input from the coaching staff on, hey, here's what we saw this season. He needs to be making his own decisions because his coaching staff may not be here next year. So he's got to get in place now.
Yeah, other schools, the agents are listening to other schools as well, so they're way ahead of you. So it's given this person who has to come in not as much time really, and it's going to be interesting. Depends if they go to the NFL to grab somebody, or if it's someone from another school or wherever they decide to go. But you could certainly tell they had no plan in place. There was no plan in place for this, and they certainly did not have one right after the Stanford game or even the NC State game. As it's showing its true colors as we speak on this. But like we said, Florida State's got to find as general manager to get things going, because this is immediate. I mean, this is a huge factor, and I think when they're looking for a general manager, they're looking for someone that will outlast, of course, Mike Norvell on this team. And a lot of that reporting will go to the front office on where things head, because you don't expect for Mike Norvell to be your head coach, I don't think, going into the 2027 season. But you know what? We've been through some unbelievable stuff the last couple of years, so it wouldn't shock me, sadly, if this is 2027. But nonetheless, though, it has to be this way where, you look at like an NFL organization. If, for example, Jason Light for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that's your general manager, you can still move on from your head coach, most certainly, and keep your GM if you feel like he's doing a good job. That usually is the case unless that general manager position is not performing to what it should be of its priorities. And Florida State, you got to reach an ACC championship, man. And that's just not been the way with how these rosters have been built in Tallahassee the last 2 years. Let's move on real quick. I'll mention, though, Nick Williams, Florida State's edge coach, became official for the Seminoles, big-time recruiter as well, which is going to help Florida State, hopefully. But really interested to see how well he does, too, on the field with developing guys off the edge, because there's some young talent to work with there. And then, speaking of front office, Derek Ray off the UCLA front office job, and the Seminoles are moving on there. Any last thoughts on the addition of Williams and the departure of Derek Ray?
Yeah, Florida State officially announced this, the addition of Nick Williams to the coaching staff as the edge coach and pass rush specialist back on Thursday. I will just read off Mike Norvell's comment on the addition. He said, "I'm excited to add Nick to our coaching staff. He is a relentless worker who does a great job building relationships. He has a proven ability to develop high-level production, evidenced by his multiple NFL draft picks along the defensive line. Nick is a South Georgia native who will make his presence felt, attracting top talent to the program, teaming up with Coach Knighton and providing great leadership for our defensive front."
Okay, Nick Williams, official. And Derek Ray, gone.
Peace.
And a reset.
Bye.
What position? What do we get the official position for him?
I think GM.
Is he gone to the same role over there with them? Well, that's good. He goes back to the West Coast. He's from over there. Going to be closer to, I would imagine, family ties as well on the West Coast. And, a lot of guys looking for a little reset, like we were talking about with Coach Yak, getting a reset there, tow cars, reset, getting a bigger role there as an offensive coordinator. Like, hey, you could say that Mike Norvell tree, man, he sent one off to the SEC, then he was able to get Tony Tokars as a offensive coordinator. And okay, it is UCLA, so you're definitely stepping down the ladder quite a bit. But just speaking of Derek Ray, man, like that's going to be a hefty job to be able to handle. Like he was having to deal with fires here in Tallahassee. Dude, the ones over there at UCLA, they've got a lot to deal with, and he's got a big job ahead of him for himself.
Going to be tough, no doubt. But, I do like that coaching hire UCLA made, bringing in the James Madison head coach, a guy who's won at all of his previous stops. And, we'll see if he's able to continue doing that at the FBS level. And then, as far as Derek Ray, I think, the last 2 years at Florida State were obviously a big disappointment. The first two seasons were pretty solid overall with what Florida State was able to do, especially from as far as bringing guys in from the transfer portal. But the last two classes, I mean, you've had more bust than guys who have produced on the field for you. And, the high school recruiting hasn't been any better. And, at the end of the day, recruiting, scouting, I mean, that's basically the primary role of his job, and also acquiring guys out of the transfer portal, and just too many misses than hits at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Got to do better. All right, gentlemen, I want to bring up a topic to you guys. I thought this would be pretty fun here. 5 players Florida State must retain going into the 2026 season, because we did see a lot of flashes from some young guys, a lot of guys that ended up being starters for you, some freshmen as well that we're about to talk about here. But I wanted to give a list here from 1 down to 5. Who would be the top 5 that y'all would be after? I've got my list on here as well. I can start off if you guys want. I'm putting Usman Kroma at 1 there. And there's been some talk and chatter that when coming to Florida State, he was originally committed to Georgia, making that big flip there, that in his NIL deal, that this was going to be for a multi-year contract. But still, I don't trust much, as I have not been able to trust much of this team and staff and administration for the last 2 years. So that's why I'm still putting them on here. They must retain Usman Kroma for mine at number 1.
And clearly the multi-year deals don't matter, because you saw that guy from Georgia transfer over to Missouri, and then now Georgia is suing Missouri for like $300,000 or something like that to recoup part of the contract. So again, I mean,
and the guy from, was it Xavier Lucas that went from Wisconsin to Miami? Like it happens. They have ways out.
It's a weird sport nowadays. But we're starting with 1, like the most important guy.
Yeah. We'll get straight to the punch. That's going to be interesting to see, kind of, I think, going down to the 5. Yeah.
I'm going to start off guy who's not necessarily going to enter the portal, but potentially the NFL. I'm going to go Deuce Robinson, your main weapon on offense in 2025. And, maybe you have an opportunity to retain him depending on how much NIL you're willing to back up. And, Deuce, potentially another season at the college level, he could solidify himself as a top 3 round guy, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly where I went. When you gave it to us, my thought process was, who are the 5 guys that can impact winning most next year? And to me, Deuce Robinson's number 1. He was just too good for this program this year. He could have been a Blitnikoff finalist and no one would have scoffed at it. And he was a couple plays away from really having one of the most productive receiver seasons in Florida State history. So if you're going to plan on winning next year, Deuce Robinson has to be the biggest priority.
Yeah, Deuce is very important. He's a guy that, as we know, if he cleans up a few things too as well, he would have scored multiple other touchdowns. And, there's a lot of plays that he wanted to have back, but he would be an immediate factor for you in 2026. And, when we talk about where this quarterback room is headed, that's why you got to find answers for Deuce, man, and a lot of these other wide receivers, because that there's some young talent in there as well. But you got to find someone that can get the ball to him. And Tommy Castellanos, if he was able to come in and ride with Tommy, and knowing that this was going to be a guy that's not the biggest passer and isn't the most accurate and is just going to kind of give you some bombs and shots and please make a play for me, thank you, Deuce. I think if Florida State is able to find improvement there with a guy that can throw the ball well, I think you do have a good shot at keeping Deuce, because I think he really did enjoy his time in Tallahassee. But they've got to start finding these answers early to start keeping some retainment on some of these guys. Number 2, where y'all at with number 2 here?
Should we just go reverse order this time?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Number 2 for me is Mandrell Desir. Pro Football Focus didn't really love his season. Like, he was one of the lower graded defenders on Florida State's team, but he led the team in pressures with 24, easily led them in sacks with 6, had 16 quarterback hurries as a true freshman, mind you. He still has a lot of potential. He's got the frame that really matters in this kind of system. And yes, we can quibble about, does the 3-3-5 actually work at a program like Florida State? But if it's going to work, Mandrell Desir is going to be a focus of that system moving forward.
And I think, you can kind of lump both of those guys in there, the twins together, because they're either both staying or they're both going. It's not one in, one out situation. I mean, those guys are locked in with one another. Obviously, I've got them coming later on. My number 2 is Jabril Rawls. Missed part of the 2025 season due to an injury, but when he was out there, in my opinion, he was Florida State's best defensive player this season. Showed physicality coming up there to stop runs and was pretty good in pass coverage as well. I think he's a building block for Florida State with the culture and what he brings to the locker room, not only with his play on the field.
Yeah, I got Deuce there at 2, so I already talked about him a good bit. So let's keep moving here to number 3. Where do you have it stand here for you, D-Lou, to start us off?
I got to go again.
Yep. Snake draft.
I'll
where it
go
gets
Twins.
interesting. That's what I was saying. That's why I want to start from 1. I think things get interesting as it go down to 5.
I think I'll go Twins here.
Okay.
You know, both of those guys, they look pretty solid as true freshmen. Obviously, Mandrell leading the team in sacks. I think he was one of the top pass rushing defensive tackles and the entirety of the FBS, you know, not just among true freshmen. It's really impressive to see what he did this year. And, you know, Darryl as well had some solid flash. I think 23 quarterback pressures, something around that. So you would just figure, you know, both of those guys can keep growing. You know, I think they're probably more of high floor, low ceiling types, but there is still some room for them to continue to grow and develop right now. If they can get to their ceiling, I mean, they're going to be really nice pieces for Florida State for multiple years.
I think Tony White loves them. Obviously, we saw them play in the Alabama game. I was like, whoa, who are these guys coming off
first drive?
Yeah, literally. I was like there in the stands, like, wait a second, what the heck? These Desir twins are in there, and we're hearing great things about them in the camps and such. But to see it, be able to throw those guys out there, and I just like their energy. I like the energy. That's the mentality that you want to see for Florida State defense, and those guys got to stick around. So I agree there. We've already talked about. I've already had Chroma. We've talked about Deuce. I'm at Jabril Rawls here too. That's for me at number 3. When we're talking about energy and what matches the Desirs, it's Jabril Rawls. I mean, the way that he played, we would have our instant reactions and be like, all right, so you need 10 more of those guys out there. Good tackler. I thought he brought some accountability too as well, which you really need for Florida State, which at the beginning of the year, you did have that. Then it fell off in the middle part of it as well. And you could tell too at times Florida State was hurting there, and they had to rely on Jerry Wilson. When Jerry Wilson was a disastrous addition for Florida State, sadly, which you didn't think that was going to happen, but wasn't the greatest. And I think maybe Coach Surtain wanted to see some of the younger guys out there over Jerry Wilson as much. We don't know entirely about that, but I think he felt pretty confident in some of these younger guys and wanted to get them more playing time over Jerry coming in, and they got put into a position to bring in a more experienced guy like Jerry. But Jabril Rawls ended up being your top corner, and he beat out a lot of guys to get into that position, and you got to make sure you do a good job of doing that. And you're seeing, I think Edwin Joseph put some out on his Instagram of him and Jabril Rawls in a photo and said, you know, you're up next, or trying to recruit him away from FSU. It's going to be, not an easy task for Florida State to try to keep this guy here, because he's going to get some offers from other colleges across the country.
3 for me was Usman Chroma. I know you've already talked about him, Logan, but if we're going to have a bell cow running back, which Cam Martin, the new running backs coach, has consistently had 1,000-yard rusher everywhere he's been, Chroma's the likeliest guy to be able to do that. Like, yes, Sam Singleton has talent. Cam Davis has talent. I don't think either of them have the upside that Usman Chroma brings. He was really good as a true freshman. And if you can have another offseason in a college strength and conditioning program, add a little bit more speed to that frame, he's going to be a terror, because he's got everything you want as a running back. And I think he's someone that you have to keep moving forward.
And I think, dude, the rotating is going to diminish, like you just said. Cam Martin coming in, that's going to trim up a whole ton. I think you see 1-2 as a 1-2 punch, and there might be some bad series from Chroma. There might be some times where he doesn't hit the hole, the right spot and such. That's fine. Let him learn, man. Let him learn. You don't have to throw in another running back out there and just completely switch up things until you don't even see him for the rest of the game. That's exactly what would happen, which is absolutely stunning to me. Which scares me about having Gus Malzahn again. I understand they probably coming into this year, it wasn't going to be the full philosophy of a Gus Malzahn offense. Maybe there's some agreements where, with the personnel we have, this is how it's going to be. But this is Florida State. You've got to win. And if that's your best running back, you just ride with that guy and let him learn. And that's Usman Chroma to me.
The impressive thing for me with him was his ability to break tackles. Like, it wasn't often that he went down on the first hit, much less the second hit. Like, he was just able to shrug them off and keep running. And that's going to be huge for this offense. That's why Trey Benson was so successful, because he was able to break that contact and really get it going. He led Florida State in yards after contact, and he only had 91 snaps this year as a rusher. Like, that's just impressive.
Yeah. What do we have? Yeah. I mean, Yeah, definitely gotta ride with them, ride with Usman Kroma moving forward. All right, number 4, right? I think we all got
Yep.
our threes. All right, we all got our threes. Let's move on to number 4. I think it's back over to me now. Give me Wayne McCoy. If we're going to add in a passing quarterback, which we're hoping, then I'm going there with Wayne. And started to see a little bit of a groove there at the end of the season. A guy that likes to play with a lot of passion, which I do love. I like seeing that as long as you take care of it and be mature with it. But I think he's really talented. I think he runs some crisp routes for you. He's got some good hands for you as well. Reliable guy, too. And I thought he was wide receiver, too. We didn't see Squirrel White after the Alabama game until he muffed the punt against NC State. But it was easily Wayne McCoy as wide receiver, too, in this as well. But I think Weezy is my number 4 here.
Am I next?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, get right ahead. Go and get you.
I don't hate it. Wayne McCoy might be on my list. I got a couple names noted here. I'm trying to decide between. My number 4, you guys have already put him on the list. It's going to be Kroma. I think he's another guy that can be a building block for you in the future. Obviously, this season didn't arrive on campus until June and was still able to work his way into the rotation there and play a big role for Florida State. This will be his first true college offseason, and it'll be a big time for him to continue in that development. And if he is able to achieve that upside, that high ceiling, I mean, he's going to be a very good one for Florida State and potential, like you guys have said, 1,000-yard candidate in 2026.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my first 3, like I was set on Deuce, Didasiers, and Kroma, and then I was deciding between 4 guys for these last 2 slots. This first one ended up going Mekhi Danzy. I just think someone that is that fast and that special with the ball in his hands has to be someone you focus on, especially being a guy that's a Tallahassee native that really wants to represent for this program. He has to be a priority. Now, he's still very raw. Like, he had a lot of issues with the ball in his hands and actually catching the ball, which if you're going to be a receiver, you've got to focus on that. But someone that is that electric, like when his 80% jog is faster than everybody else on the football field, you got to retain a guy like that. He's too special of a talent speed wise for him to not be a priority. And that includes just him saying, hey, I just want to focus on track. Like, you've got to find a way to keep this guy in the football program.
No, I agree. He's right there in my top 5 just for that reason of speed. And it's going to get interesting too, because if you look at it, he's a track star. And there's a lot of schools across the country that will also look for his talents as well. But I think the homegrown ties will hopefully help Florida State in its favor there. But I would imagine, though, a lot of schools are looking at him. Plus, too, Gus needs someone to run the sweeps. Who else is going to run the sweeps? Who's it going to be? It's going to be Mekhi Danzy, of course. But if he can improve there in his first season, too, as a wide receiver, came in as a running back as well. So development will be huge. And I've liked what we've seen from your wide receivers coach with Tim Harris. So I think you see a strong future ahead for him. But I agree, he's in my top 5 as well to retain. He was a guy that brought a lot of burst, a lot of explosiveness to your offense. And if that's something Gus Malzahn likes to do, as we know he does, then, that's what you want to add there to your offense going into 2026 and must be retained.
I remember, this was a guy who was just fighting to be in the rotation probably going into that 2025 season. And he ends up being one of your top wide receivers and getting into that starting lineup as the year progressed. And, just made plenty of explosive highlight plays, has the speed that you can't teach. And that's a guy, Florida State, absolutely. They got to keep him on the roster. Tallahassee native, he grew up wanting to play at Florida State. The offers are going to come in from other places, but Florida State, they need to do everything in their power to keep this guy in garnet and gold.
All right. Where are we going? We're at 5.
Yeah. I got maybe a surprise name for my 5th. I thought about Wayne. I thought about Rawls, but I don't like the numbers that's being floated around for what it's going to take to keep him in Tallahassee. So went away from him. I'm going with Sandman Thompson, a guy that was a true freshman, but you got to have guys that you can develop on that offensive line. And he looked so good as a true freshman that you got to keep him around and have a building block for the next 3-4 years, especially as a center, because the centers are going to be huge for getting the rest of the offensive line set and making sure everyone's in tune. And Sandman showed that much potential just as a true freshman. As he continues to develop under Herb Hand, I think he's a guy that you have to keep.
Mhm.
I like it. I had him noted down as well, along with LaWayne McCoy, who was previously mentioned. Had Kevin Wynn on here, but I think for my number 5, I'm going to go with Amari Williams because Florida State, I mean, they need a serious boost off that edge. And one thing I will remind people about Amari Williams is, I mean, he's still a year below what he should really be. Originally a 2026 recruit, he reclassified to that 2025 class, came in as a true freshman, and they pretty much had him on offense for the entirety of that year, and then started to make the switch to defense this offseason, where he was practicing on both sides of the ball, made that really a full-time move there late in September or so, because he started off getting some reps on offense and defense, had a game where he caught a touchdown, and then on the next defensive play he recorded a sack. So there's some real potential there. He's very young. I think this is going to be a big offseason for him and his growth. And Florida State, I mean, they absolutely have to get that pass rush back on the right side. And with a new position coach coming in, a guy who has produced guys at his previous stops and who will be the edge coach and pass rush specialist, maybe Amari Williams can finally have his breakout in 2026.
Mm-hmm. Maybe so. I think I've beat. I don't know. I've lost because I did like top 6 because I've done Chroma, I've done the Desir twins, I've done Rawls, I've done Wayne McCoy, and I've already done Deuce Spann. So
Deuce
maybe I'll do
Spann.
honorable. Can I do it?
Deuce Spann. What?
Deuce Spann. Do not call him a guy, Dan.
God dang it, man. Deuce Spann. Damn it.
What are we doing?
Not Deuce Spann. I want to give nightmares to everybody. Didn't he score like a big touchdown this last season?
Yeah, that 4th down conversion.
Okay. Very good.
That is more than I thought Deuce Spann did for Pitt this year.
Well, he did it against FSU, so.
Yeah, he did it
listen,
FSU.
I've already blocked this season out of my memory.
Let me do like a little honorable mention, though, real quick. I want to give one, and it depends. He's a veteran guy, and he's played with Gus Malzahn for
James. Oh,
a
sorry.
couple years.
Never mind.
Who?
I thought you were going to say James Williams. You said veteran guy.
No, stop. Don't be silly. Don't be stupid now. Don't be stupid. Don't be stupid. Don't get silly now. I'm about to, TJ Watt's not playing, but I'm about to watch a white boy defensive end play like a real defensive end. Don't start with me like that. I'm up here in Pittsburgh. We respect good-ass white defensive ends up here. Also, too, TJ Watt, please be okay. Lung situation with the trainers. Need to be fired. Should have been fired yesterday. My gosh, scared me. Anyways, we got Highsmith tonight. We got Herbig. We got our other rookie. Feeling great about night. We'll be all right.
You just give your honorable mentions.
Randy Pittman. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Throw Randy Pittman in there. I think that injury definitely it lingered throughout the season. You could tell. He pushed as much as he could throughout that Alabama game. But man, just it kind of hurt him a little bit. But man, I mean, he was all over he threw a touchdown. He had 2 receiving touchdowns. He had 3 rushing touchdowns. I mean, this dude was a little hybrid for you on this offensive side of the ball, 208 yards and receiving as well. And I think Florida State is hoping to implicate or a little bit more of the if they can. And I think they were affected by Tommy and just with how, he's not a great passer. I think, they would like to keep Randy Pittman around, and I think that helps a ton with your offense and both what you want to do in your schemes, blocking, and also to hopefully more in the passing game and too in the rush game. And he was huge for you in the red zone as well. Just a big playmaker, and also two plays with a lot of physicality, and you can build a lot around that as a tight end with him.
I agree. I think the injuries really limited his effectiveness for Florida State throughout the season, and even still, I mean, he was able to produce for you as a receiver in clutch moments, as a rusher, and even as a passer. I mean, just kind of did it all for this Florida State offense. Still a level to go for him. I think he can raise his productivity, obviously, if he's a little bit more healthy in 2026. And he's got those 3 years of experience playing under Gus. So why not one more run if Florida State puts enough money on the table?
And it would also help if he has a quarterback that can actually get it to him consistently. That would help.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, if you look at the tight end room, they kind of need it a little bit, to be honest with you. I mean, where did Landon Thomas go last year? Don't know where he went. And Marquise and Douglas is gone. as well. Like, you kind of need this. They moved over Chase Lofton over to wide receiver. I would imagine he moves back over to tight end, but he dealt with the season-ending injury too last year. His tight end room, they need Randy Pittman, so that's kind of another factor there for me. Anything else, gentlemen, and honorable mentions before we get to shout out to Sleeper and then basketball latest to wrap it up?
I've got a couple from my side. I've got LaWayne McCoy, who you guys mentioned. I've got Kevin Wynn, and I've got Samuel Singleton Jr., and also Sandman Thompson.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So,
The only other honorable mention I would say is Sperry, but he was never going to sniff the top 5, considering the names we've mentioned. But you got to have a quarterback in that room that you feel good about developing.
yeah.
Yeah.
I did in there too as my honorable mention.
I thought about it, but 17 pass attempts. Florida State can't bank on him going into 2026. I just felt like he wasn't.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like, he's not. I don't think any of us expect him to be the starter next year, but you still want to have a guy in that room that you can develop to potentially be the starter in 2027.
Yeah, that's thinking if Mike Norvell is back, I guess, for 2027. Because if he's not, I mean, majority of these guys are going to hit the portal anyway, and the new coach that comes in is going to bring in his own guys, whether transfers from his previous stops, guys who were committed to him in his recruiting class, like we've seen with some of the coaching movement throughout this cycle. So it was just hard for me to justify putting him on there.
Mm-hmm. And we'll do a way deeper dive. Once things kind of slow down on the news cycle, we'll have a lot of time to do these kind of things. So we'll get an Excel sheet. We'll start listing out things, and some of them we'll be blocking off just in case they end up hitting the portal themselves. But before we move on to some basketball, let's give a shout out over to our friends over there at Sleeper. If you guys use code Noles down below, NOLES, as you guys can see right there, go down in the description. You guys can use our code there, get a 100% match up to $100 on your first deposit. We've been using Sleeper. Did we get a win this last?
We got a win.
We did get a win this last weekend. We're not making picks tonight, and honestly, it's probably for the good since I'm up here in Pittsburgh, and I would probably make some picks, and they'd go completely reverse in that factor for us. So we're not going to make any picks here, but we do appreciate Sleeper partnering with us this entire football season. Like I said, definitely use that code NOLES. You can do mores, less, also great for fantasy. Also, too, if you just want like the quickest updates ever for you guys, if you're on fantasy or just if you're wanting to follow your team, like for me, for the Steelers, like I've got it connected to my Steelers alerts. I get these alerts so quick. It's almost faster than how you get them on, X and Twitter and such. So highly suggest you guys go download the app today. Sleeper, 100% match up to $100. Code NOLES, Noles. Appreciate them, like I said, for partnering with us throughout this entire season. All right, gentlemen, what's going on with FSU basketball?
Well, before we talk about that, should we talk about Kai Bates entering the portal just real quick?
Oh, okay. There we go. Talking about some defensive backs entering the portal. Here we go. Anyway, we were just talking about it. We a little bit did a dive into that cornerback room, talking about with Brandon Harris and what the future outlook is going to look for some of these guys trying to retain them. The staff felt very high on him coming through his recruitment. You probably have a little bit more details on that one, D. Lou. But that's another potential attrition there from the roster for Florida State in its secondary.
Yeah, I mean, a 4-star guy coming in his recruiting class, and he was obviously in that class alongside Charles Lester, Ricky Knight, and some of those other guys in that DB room. And, another one where he just hasn't been able to get on the field these past 2 seasons, only has 2 career tackles to his name. And, even with the injuries piling up in the cornerback room this season, where Quindarius Jones was knocked out pretty early on in the campaign, and Jabril missed some time in September and then missed, the last couple of games of the year, he still just wasn't able to work himself into that rotation. And, we talked about Jerry Wilson's struggles, and Florida State was even starting true freshman Shamar Arnu for a couple of games there. And, Charles Lester was the primary backup in that instance, and you weren't seeing a lot of Kai Bates on the field. And, I think he just saw the writing on the wall, especially with the guy who recruited him now being fired for Florida State, and he can go out and try and get a fresh start somewhere.
All right, basketball, VZ. What's going on what's happening? I mean, I want to hear the truth though. Like what needs to be fixed? What's the issue right now? And I understand too, the roster is not anywhere close to where Luke wants it. But what's just kind of going on with the team right now before they head into some ACC play later on?
Yeah, coming off a bad loss against UMass on Saturday in the Orange Bowl Classic. I think the final score was 103-95. I've already taken the box score down because I was tired of looking at it. Just a ugly defensive game. Guys were over pursuing on the perimeter, trying to force a turnover, and then weren't rotating correctly behind them, especially down low. Just you're getting torched by Leonardo Bettiol and Daniel Hankins-Sanford, who both ended up with 20-plus points in that game, and a lot of them were just wide open looks or looks that were way too easy. Part of it's the roster because Florida State just doesn't have the centers that they need to be a good team. Like Alaire Malouk has potential. He's still a little too skinny, a little too lackadaisical with his hands. Alex Steen just doesn't have the size needed. And Shah Muhammad, as good as an athlete as he is, he's just not a good player. And that's part of this roster's problem is they're just not very talented, very athletic players. And a lot of that's from the funding issues and all sorts of other things. But it's a lot of things. Yes, scheme is part of it. They're trying to create turnovers, and when they're not getting those turnovers, they're just not rotating correctly on the backside, and that's leading to a lot of issues. And part of it's effort. Like Laux laid into him on the radio broadcast. He's like, this effort just cannot stand. We can't be this far in the season. I'm still coaching effort. That's inexcusable. But part of it is the rosters just isn't that talented. They're not that athletic. And that's going to come back to bite them in some of these other games. And they go to Dayton tomorrow. Like, that's not going to be an easy game either. Like, yes, Dayton allows teams to shoot 40% from three, but you're playing at a place that is historically
those buckets too.
Yeah, but Dayton's a historically tough place to play. And Dayton's, found a lot of success with Anthony Grant as their head coach these last few years. And they're come ready to play, and Florida State hasn't come ready to play in most of these last 4 games that have all been losses for them. Yes, the Houston loss was at least a step in the right direction, but then you take 6 steps backwards with a loss to UMass, who, while they do have some talent, they shouldn't be beating Florida State at any point in time. And part of it's like, hey, Marcus Banks Jr. is a really good shooter. Why are we leaving him open with 1 second left on the shot clock to help off a defender who's driving? It just doesn't make sense. It's a lot of brain dead mistakes as well, but that's just, this team just doesn't have that kind of talent to overcome that.
Yeah, and I mean, it really feels like the effort has lacked in 3 of these last 4 losses during this tough stretch for Florida State. And, I think part of it, to your point, VZ, Luke Laux had to go out and completely rebuild this team, only had 2 guys return to the program, and a lot of this was built on guys that he offered right after he got to Florida State in the high school class, and then landing a bunch of guys out of the portal. And, you were able to beat up on some of those non-conference teams who, frankly, aren't very good. But now that you're starting to play against some legitimate competition, I think you're starting to see some of the warts with this roster. And, I mean, it's just going to take some time. I mean, remember, Luke Laux, he had to scramble to get things together. He's got a really good recruiting class signed for this upcoming year. So, this was never going to be a quote-unquote quick fix for Florida State basketball. There are going to be some growing pains. There are going to be some warts. I think you have to give Luke Laux his time, and he will get this thing going back in the right direction. Yeah,
and there's not going to be a lot of patience with Florida State fans right now because they're tired of football being bad, so they're looking to other outlets.
Oh, yeah.
But basketball was never going to be a quick fix. Like, NCAA tournament was never going to happen this year. Probably won't even happen next year. Like, this is going to take multiple years to get the fun. Get the funding that he needs, and B, to get the talent in that he needs to be successful in the ACC. Again, that doesn't excuse a loss to UMass. He would be the first one to tell you. But the team just isn't that good. They're not that talented.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? It's a good year for Luke Laux to learn, too, as a head coach. His first time being a head coach, he's going to learn a lot from this. Yeah. I always try to take the positives out of things and try to be optimistic, but he is going to learn a lot, and certainly, too, on the effort side, that is going to be always a focus for you as a head coach and in any profession, and that's got to be better, and he's going to learn how to coach that and improve that and set a bar for how it should be every game. So he's a young guy. He's going to learn and such, and like you said, the talent is just not there yet. But next year, there's some younger guys that are going to come in, and, they're going to start to build on that developmental, and it's going to take a while, like you just said, multi-year situation for basketball. But like you said, I was just thinking that too. I was like, man, fans were like immediately looking for basketball and hoping, okay, things go very well there, and blah blah blah, make whatever you can do in the ACC, but that just wasn't going to be the case. It just sucks that football has done this 2 years in a row to you, where you kind of just like looking for something to do for the rest of the year, and it's just just still go out there and support, though, man. Just still go out there and support. And women's soccer just won a damn national championship. So real quick, we'll wrap it up here. I want to give a shout out to Zaynol, our guy, or Zaynol, always on here with us on YouTube, throwing a $10 bomb on us, saying appreciate the content, boys. Logan, make sure you go grab a panini sandwich.
I don't think that's how that's pronounced. You had chances. That was not it.
My bad. I completely did not see the R. I did not see the R. And you know what? That's embarrassing for me. But that's my first time in Pittsburgh, though. Clementi sandwich. That's right there. That's right on it. Go to Mount Washington. I'm gonna see Darnell Washington in person today. Truck somebody. Oh my God, I can't wait. But then go ride the incline. I think we're doing that tomorrow, and then maybe the Steelers Hall of Fame honor and Hall of Honor and the stadium tour. I'm hoping so, man. I'm hoping so. It should be a good time. I appreciate the $10 bump. Dustin's still laughing at me. Who did he say earlier? What did Dustin say earlier? That was completely off, so we can laugh at him too. There was something.
It hasn't been too bad.
D-Lou knows. He knows.
I didn't say Deuce Span.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Today he's been fine. As a guy who always points out when he messes up those kind of stuff, he was fine today.
He was fine for it today, and then he laughs. Yeah, no, I got me a good one. But yeah, no, thank you, Zeno, for the donation there. Looking forward to the game. It is gonna be cold, man. It is gonna be like in the teens, and it's snowing right now as we speak. Little light flurries, but nothing too crazy. But I'm looking forward to being there for my first game. And surely the Miami Dolphins won't come in here and ruin my trip. Surely that wouldn't happen, because they're known for not being able to play in the cold. I swear to God.
Amazing.
No, it would not be. I was just about to say congratulations for beating the Cowboys last night, but Cowboys are dookie.
No, they are. Like, they made J.J. McCarthy look like a good quarterback. They're
Any
terrible.
one of us could throw against that secondary for the Cowboys. But yeah, that's going to do it for us. We'll see you guys later in the week. If you guys want us to, we'll do a deep dive into why Florida State shouldn't go after Gigi Lagway, because I do see a handful of comments on that, but maybe we'll save that for later in the week. And like I said, we've got a lot of other topics to go through later on, but we appreciate y'all listening. If you're still here with us on YouTube, consider hitting that like button down below. We would appreciate it. Helps go out to more FSU fans and get them in here, dropping some topics, some comments. We appreciate it too. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell next to it. It notifies you when we do go live straight to your phone. Appreciate all the new subscribers over the last few weeks. Y'all stay warm. Everybody stay warm, and we'll talk to you guys later on the week. And hear the spear. Peace.